The end of the year is almost upon us, and that means that I need to hold myself accountable to some of the reading goals that I set at the start of this year. Like many, I created what's called a 25 and 25 list, which is basically this trend here on BookTube where booktubers will create a list of a set number of books that matches the end date of whatever year it is. So in this case of 2025, it was 25 books. I did not end up posting this video, but I still have been sort of following through with this list throughout most of the year. However, there have been some months that I just didn't read as much books and other times where I just wasn't as interested in some of these books on my list. So today I wanted to do what's called the 10 before the end trend. Mostly going to be composed of the books that I have not read yet on this 25 and 25 list. There are a couple that I'm going to talk about that I do not want to read in the last couple of months of the year just because some of them are a lot longer, or maybe I want to go and reread the rest of the series. But I do have 6 here, and then I also have an additional 4 that are just other books that I've added on, and then I do have 2 here that I'm currently in the middle of that are from that 25 and 25 list, so I did want to just briefly talk about them, though I do plan to finish them in the month of October as opposed to November and December, which the rest of the books I'm planning on finishing in those last 2 months. Let's just start off with those 2 books. The first one is The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King. This is the sequel to Serpent and the Wings of Night by Carissa Broadbent. This one is following a main character named Araya, who is the human daughter of the Vampire King, and she participates in this competition where she hopes to win immortality and become a vampire. I really enjoyed the first one. I also really liked the romance in this, and the first book ends on a huge cliffhanger, so I have been really waiting to like pick this one up, though I've been kind of nervous going into it because I've heard a lot of mixed opinions from different people about this series and also its follow-ups, but I am so far really enjoying this. It is a lot denser than it looks because this book looks small, but it's actually almost 600 pages, I believe. It's deceptively short, so it has been a lot more of a slower reading process than I initially anticipated. And then the second one is The Dagger in the Flame by Catherine Doyle. I started reading this one as an audiobook because my library did not have The Ashes of the Star-Cursed King as an audiobook, and I wanted to listen to an audiobook. I've been reading this both physically and as audiobook and sometimes together as well, and so far I'm really enjoying it. We're following a main character named Serpent, whose mother sort of works for these 2 rival gangs, and she kind of deals illegal smuggling, and Serpent one time comes home and basically finds that her mother has been killed, and so she ends up joining one of these gangs and unexpectedly starts having a bit of a rivalry with one of the members of the other gang. I think so far it's been a bit slow, and I don't mean slow as in the pacing itself is slow, but I think the storyline has been slow to pick up. I'm about halfway and we're only now getting a lot of the magic system stuff going on, but I am still really enjoying it so far. And then also to briefly go over the other books that I decided not to continue with. The first one is the book Fatebreaker by Victoria Aveyard. This is the 3rd book in the Realmbreaker series. I really liked the first 2 books. I know that that's a bit of an unpopular opinion, but I do think she's doing something pretty unique. YA epic fantasy, which does seem a little bit like an oxymoron almost, but I do think that she is doing something that is quite unique. I read the first 2 books back to back, I believe in 2022, so it's been 3 years, and Fatebreaker got pushed back, I believe, a year, and then I just haven't picked it up. I don't really remember the events of the first 2 books that well, so I don't know how much I'll end up enjoying the 3rd one if I were to read it now. Duet with the Siren Duke, and this is by Elise Kova. This is the 4th book in her Married to Magic series, which is a series of interconnected standalones following arranged marriages between human women and monstrous men. I've really enjoyed this series so far, and I've been really wanting to read the Duet with the Siren Duke. I had a horrible time reading this summer, and I feel like this book is just super summer coded. I did read her Arcana Academy book this year instead though, so I do feel like I did kind of somewhat accomplish it by still reading a book by this author. Although I also do have her A Dawn with the Wolf Knight, which I do think fits the more fall vibes better than a, very summer oriented book. The Grace of Kings. This is the start of, I don't know what this series is called, called actually, but I do have the entire series in the Broken Binding special editions. This is why I wanted to get to that series this year, because I did spend a lot of money on those special editions, plus I've had the first book for quite some time now because I have a separate copy of it, but I just didn't feel super compelled to pick it up, and I'm a little bit hesitant to start such a huge series, especially because there is another book on this list that I think I'm more interested in reading that is also a special edition series that I have. And then the last one is Iron Gold by Pierce Brown. This is the 4th book in the Red Rising series. I love the first trilogy. However, I feel like it has such a neat ending that I feel very hesitant to continue with it, even though I do want to. I've also gotten spoilers for what happens in this later series as well, which is actually from the author themselves. An interview that he did where he said something about killing off a character, and I just immediately knew it was going to be my favorite character, and spoiler alert, it actually is. So I'm very hesitant to continue with it because I know it's going to happen and I don't want that to happen. So it is a bit of like a silly excuse, but I'm just not emotionally ready to deal with the intensity of emotions that I know that Iron Gold is going to elicit out of me, but that's a goal for next year. Now for the ones that I'm actually going to read. A Study in Drowning by Ava Reed. This one we're following a main character named Effie, who is an architecture student, and she's studying at a university, and in this world there's a lot of restrictions placed on women, especially in pursuing higher education. So I think the themes and discussions that the author is going to explore in this book are really interesting. However, I have not heard the best reviews for this, and this is something that has kind of hindered me from reading Ava Reed's books in general, because I actually do own most of her books and I need to stop buying them without reading any of them. So this is the one that I chose out of the 4 books of hers that I do own. I'm very hesitant to pick it up because, once again, I have 4 of her books and I'd like to enjoy them all, but I don't know if I will even enjoy any of them. Red Seas Under Red Skies by Scott Lynch. This is the 2nd book in the Gentleman's Bastard series. The first book is called The Lies of Locke Lamora, and it's a very, very popular series here on BookTube. However, it has not been continued for like over a decade, so I am a bit hesitant about this one, but this was the first series that I got when I signed up for the Broken Binding subscription, and I no longer am subscribed to them. I still do really cherish the books that I had, but it was just way too much money for me to justify, and I read the first one a while ago and I did really enjoy it, but it wasn't like my favorite book and it didn't blow me away in the same way that I feel like it did for a lot of other people. But I still am excited to read this one, and once again, I just talk about the Dagger in the Flame book, and that one has a very similar setting. It's set in like a city and there's like rival gangs, and this one also had that in the first book. I know that the second book I think is set in a different location, but it still has similar elements, and reading through A Dagger in the Flame has honestly made me want to pick up this one because I want more of that darker sort of gritty assassin stuff that the Dagger in the Flame isn't quite giving because it's a YA book. So that's why I still would like to read this one, because this was one that I was kind of on the fence about. And then, speaking of being on the fence about, here's another one that also very similarly is a BookTube darling that has some sort of gang element to it, and it is Crooked Kingdom, which is of course the sequel to Six of Crows. I read Six of Crows back in 2016, and I have yet to pick up this book. It is almost 9 years I haven't read its sequel. I did get massive spoilers about, but it makes me very hesitant to pick it up because I do really enjoy that character, and I don't really want to go through the emotional pain that I know that this book is going to inflict on me. However, sort of similar to Red Seas Under Red Skies, The Dagger in the Flame actually reminded me a lot of this book because I was listening to it on audiobook, and the male narrator is actually Freddie Carter, who played Kaz in the Shadow and Bone Netflix series, and so I was like listening to his voice and I was just remembering that TV show and how much I enjoyed it. And then I was like, oh, but you haven't even finished Crooked Kingdom, nor have you read the King of Scars duology either, and Nikolai is literally my favorite character, so what am I doing? So I do need to read Crooked Kingdom. This is probably going to be very emotionally devastating, so I'm probably going to save it till December as opposed to November. This is also the European special edition, and it has some artwork. Long Live Evil by Sarah Reese Brennan. I don't really know too much about, but I know that we're following a main character who basically gets transported to the world of her favorite novel, becomes the villainess of this book, and I really like the concepts that the author is playing with in terms of a sort of meta-narrative element by having a character who loves book series become a part of that book series and also then influence the events that are happening because she has all this foreknowledge about the world. So I really am interested in seeing how the author plays with those things, as well as I've heard really good things about Sarah Reese Brennan's writing before. I know she's written some of the short stories in the Cassandra Clare Shadowhunters universe, and I have been a Shadowhunters fan since I think 2012 is when I started reading them. 2012, 2013. Very long time. So I have read from her before, and I have really enjoyed her writing because I have enjoyed most of the short stories associated with the Shadowhunters that I've read. So yeah, I'm excited to read this one. I'm also excited for some of those darker themes, but at the same time I've heard it's kind of funny as well. And I don't know if you can see on the cover, but there is blurbs from Leigh Bardugo, who wrote Six of Crows, and Holly Black, who also wrote the Folk of the Air series, which I don't know if you can see here, but I also have the special editions of them there because that is one of my favorite series of all time. Cruel is the Light by Sophie Clark. This was the January YA Fairy Loot, and I was very excited for this one. We're following two characters who are attending some sort of exorcist training academy, and I think there's enemies to lovers dynamic. I believe they're also studying at the Vatican as well, so it has a lot of those Roman elements that I also like as a fan of Roman history and someone who's been to Rome before. I'm very excited to read this one. I also adore this cover, and the special edition is truly stunning. So I'm super excited for this one, but once again, have just been putting it off. I have also heard some not great reviews about it, but I don't think there's been anything overwhelmingly negative or problematic. It's just that people really haven't been enjoying it as much as they might have anticipated. So it doesn't seem like it's a bad book by any stretch, but it's just not as popular as some of the other Fairy Loot picks. The Dragon Bone Chair by Tad Williams. This is, I think, one of the most intimidating books of my entire TBR. This is also yet again another Broken Binding special edition. These are really stunning. I absolutely love the cover design that they did for these. I think they're so gritty and just exciting, and I just love how opulent they look. I'm very excited for this one. I don't know too much about it. All I really know is that this is one of the books that inspired the Game of Thrones series, and unlike Game of Thrones, this is actually a finished series. I also know that the audiobook narrator for this is actually the same voice actor who voiced Raphael from Baldur's Gate 3, so I have been maybe considering picking up the audiobooks for this as well, just because I think each of these books is over 1,000 pages. I think we're following like a young boy who works in the palace, and he somehow gets involved in all these court and palace politics, and there's a lot of more political and war type events happening in the world at large that he somehow becomes responsible for. But I think similar to Game of Thrones, there's also a lot of other side characters that we're following as well, so I am really anticipating getting into this world. And I hope to at least finish this first book this year and then continue with the series going forth. And this is also why I decided not to put either The Grace of Kings or Iron Gold on, is because I don't want to be taking on too many epic fantasy series. And even though Iron Gold, it's like to a certain extent I'm already partway through that series, that is the second trilogy to Red Rising, and I feel like the first trilogy did have a really satisfying ending to it, and it's also the only one of those three series that is not yet finished. That's why I'm prioritizing this one, and I'm more interested in this one at the current moment than I am in the Grace of Kings series, though I still am really excited to read that series as well. Now, because those first two books that I talked about I have already started, I did pick an extra 4 books to make it a solid 10 to read before the end of the year, and the first one of that is the only one that isn't a continuation in a series, and it's called Servant of of Earth by Sarah Hawley. I have heard literally nothing but good things about this series. This has been one of those like most talked about, but also somehow underhyped as well, romantasy series that I've been seeing on BookTube. And we're following a main character who I believe has to participate in some sort of trials competition on behalf of a fairy princess. And I love books with fae, and the second book in the series recently came out, so I would like to get to this one so that I can buy the next book and continue with the series if I do end up enjoying it. I'm also very intrigued by the elemental magic system as well that the title is sort of playing with. There's also a bit of a description on the back that says that there's different sort of houses of magic, so I am very interested to seeing how the world building and magic system works in this world, as well as getting to see what the hype around this romance is also. The Nightshade God by Hannah Witten. The first book, we're following a main character named Lore, who is basically sort of like an illegal smuggler of magic, and she has this form of magic that is basically illegal in this world that is called Mortem, that is basically death magic. However, when she is caught smuggling, instead of being killed or imprisoned, the king actually recruits her to carry out certain tasks for him, and she ends up getting embroiled in the court and palace life at large, and also possibly maybe falling in love at the same time. I have so far really enjoyed this series. There's a lot more lore and world building and magic system development that goes on than just that description, as well as I did also really enjoy the romance in this. It does have a love triangle, but I actually think the love triangle in this is very believable and more realistic than others that I have read, though I do think there is a character that I like her more so with. I'm very hesitant to read this one though, because I hate finishing series that I am enjoying, because I don't like no longer being able to return to those worlds and return to those characters. And yes, I do know that you can reread books, and I have reread books multiple times, but there's nothing quite like the first time reading something. Anyways, I am very excited to get to this one and to know what goes on with our characters. Three Shattered Souls. This is the third book in the 5 Broken Blades series, and interestingly enough, 5 Broken Blades was actually one of the books on my 25 and 25 list, so I do feel like this one is sort of continuing that, and I feel like it's very satisfying to be able to say that I did finish an entire trilogy. The first book, we're following basically a cast of 6 characters, 5 of them who are the titular Broken Blades, sort of mercenaries and cutthroats who are all recruited together on a mission to assassinate the evil tyrannical king. I didn't like the second book as much as I liked the first one, largely because it was following some of the characters that I didn't like as much, and I did like it was sort of repeating a lot of the plot points from the first book, but I am still really excited to continue and find out what happens to our characters. It's also a special edition. This is just the standard one though. And then the last book is actually one that has yet to come out, and I was originally going to put this on my 25 and 25 list. However, I decided not to because of how late it's going to come out in the year, and I felt like I was sort of taking a bit of a cop-out by putting on a book that was coming out so late in the year, because that would just allow me to kind of ignore that book until it came out almost and be like, oh, there's not 25 books, there's 24 books actually. So that's why I decided not to include it, but this is my most anticipated release of the year, and it is Empire of the Dawn by J. Kristoff. This is the third and final book in the Empire of the Vampire series, which is, I think, one of my favorite series of all time. The first book, Empire of the Vampire, absolutely blew me away, and the second book, Empire of the Damned, somehow was able to top that even more. It's like 800 pages. I think I read it in like 3 days, which is not my most impressive, considering that I did read the second book in the Stormlight Archives in 2 days, which is 1200 pages. But I still did really enjoy Empire of the Damned and also Empire of the Vampire, though Empire of the Vampire took me a bit longer to get through, and so I'm very, very eagerly anticipating Empire of the Dawn. I actually was able to get this one as a e-arc, but I just have not been able to convince myself to pick it up because I want to like hold it in my hands. I have heard some disappointing news that I do believe they replaced the artist who does the interior artwork for that edition, so I am a bit disappointed to hear that. Obviously that's kind of a publisher's decision more so than the author's. In this one, we're basically following a man named Gabriel de Leon, who is the last of the Order of Silver Saints, which is basically a group of vampire hunters who are actually the children of vampiric fathers and human mothers, are granted the gifts of their vampiric fathers' bloodlines. And in this world, there's like 4 different vampire houses. Each of them has their different powers that they use to fight against the evil of the vampires in this world. This series is super dark, super gritty. Like, I cannot stress enough that it is very, very dark, and you have to be prepared for it if you're going to be reading it. But it is so fantastically written, in my opinion, and just the way that J. Kristoff is able to make you feel for these characters, feel how they're feeling in the moments as things are going on around them, especially in such a hopeless and dark world, and yet you still want to read on and you still want to have hope that it's going to end well for them. And I'm very, very nervous that that hope that I have for these characters is going to be crushed. As much as I am anticipating this book, I know that it's going to probably be one of the most emotional reading experiences of my life so far. I think that might come close was Wind and Truth of last year, because that was just brutal in my opinion. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was gonna be, but just the way that I was feeling emotionally, I was very, very nervous. So Empire of the Dawn is definitely churning up a lot of those same emotions within me. Now that brings us to the end of the 10 books that I would like to read before the end of the year, although we did actually talk about 12 books. The most important thing for me going through the year was trying to keep myself on track for the reading goals that I set at the beginning of the year, and I think that this video has allowed me that opportunity to sort of set an intention and set my mind towards accomplishing it, because I do also have to finish my Goodreads reading goal, which I do think I'm on track to complete. I think I've read 87 books and my goal is 100, so I do think I will read 13 books in the next 2 months. Thank you once again for watching, and feel free to let me know whether or not you have read any of these books that I talked about, or if any of these books you would like to read as well. Also, feel free to let me know what books you would like to read before the end of the year. You don't have to have 10 of them. You can just give me one book, but I do think it is a good way to set our intentions moving forth towards the end of the year, and also end the year feeling accomplished with ourselves, at least when it comes to reading. So once again, thank you for watching this video and for hanging out with me and talking about books, and goodbye.